There are plenty of options out in the world that give an analog front end to give a little bit more of that sort of tube warmth or that analog warmth to a guitar sound and make it feel a little bit more natural. And one of those products that has been out a little while is the Two Notes ReVolt Guitar Analog Amp Sim. And Two Notes recently sent us this and asked us to check this out, and there's a lot of great things to be said about a product like this. So on the surface, this is a 3 preamp or 3 channel, if you like, tube driven analog front end of a guitar amp, and it can be plugged into a power amp of your current head to basically be used as a guitar head with 3 channels plus a boost. There are 2 essentially EQ sections. So we've got a clean section which has its own gain, volume and treble and bass controls, and it is voiced in the American clean kind of way, which is a Fender for those who don't know. We've got a British Crunch, which is kind of like Marshall-y, Voxy territory, and a modern lead channel which share an EQ but have their own gain and volume controls. Each of these channels also has a boost. Now, just on its own, that's a great product, and it is something that can be used, like I say, straight into the power amp or your effects return of your amplifier to be able to use this basically as a 3-channel amp. Great. But there's a whole lot of other features here that we wanted to talk about today. Not only can it do that, this has a headphone out, so you can use this as a small practice tool at home. It also has a effects loop in it, so of course I can put a reverb or delay or whatever post effects into there as well. But I can use that effects loop to add 3 more channels to my amp. So let's say I already had a clean platform amp, something like, for example, the Rev D20, which has Two Notes software in it as well. I could run this out of the effects send of this into the input of my amp, out of the effects send of my amp into the effects return of this, and then back from here, the output of this into the effects return of my amp. And I'm basically adding 3 channels to my amp. So I now have 4 channels in my amp. So that's a great feature as well, or a great use case. The other thing that is cool about this is that it has its own cab simulated XLR out. And that's great as well. This is a single cab sim, and I'm pretty sure it's sort of a 4x12 and a single one for each of the 3 channels. So a very simple direct to PA or direct to recording sound. Two Notes have also sent us the Opus, which is a fantastic amp sim and cab sim unit, plus the Genome software that Two Notes do. Now, all of this together is combining for what I think is a pretty incredible sounding rig, especially as you can see the size of it next to me here, a very small and very portable one. But where I think this begins to become even better is where you then start adding in some of the other products that Two Notes offer. And the Opus is actually a cab sim and amp sim in its own right. But the cool thing about this is that what you can do with the Opus is you can actually go through, and especially using the app that comes with it, you can go through and you can change the power amp tubes. So you can have this as, say, a lower gain Marshall-y sort of crunch in the front end here, going into a, for example, single-ended EL84, Vox-style power amp, and then coming out through a, for example, Engel-style modern closed-back 4x12. So a really, mishmash of amps, but you can really tailor it to get some very unique tones.
So let's have a look at some of the cool things that you can do with the ReVolt and the Opus together. So the ReVolt being a 3-channel preamp obviously gives us that tube in there that we can use for the warmth. But the Opus, not only is it a great amp sim, we can also use it as just the power amp. So I get the preamp from the ReVolt and I get the power amp from the Opus. So what I do is I go over and I can see here that my power amp is on, but my preamp is currently off. So that basically means that then I don't have a amp sim activated and I'm using this as the amp. So if I then move over here to, okay, here's my one bugbear with this unit, is that these buttons, if I push the menu button, I then push a select, right? I move that and then I push the other button to select it. And it just seems kind of counterintuitive. Anyway, so if I move through here, you can see that I've got different preamps. So push-pull, so 6L6, push-pull, EL84, EL34, and KT88. And then single-ended KT88, single-ended EL84, 34, and 6L6 as well. And I can also select if it's pentode or triode, and I've got a sort of a depth and other sort of controls there as well. So let's just go over here and have a look at what I've got. So if I go here and first of all I make my single-ended EL84, so I'm kind of in class A EL84 mode there. I'm going to put my British Crunch on here. Maybe dial some lows out. And because I can then go and change the cabinet, I could then go and find here I've got a Voice 65, which is a Vox sounding cab. Which is cool because I can then get a very close approximation of the real thing. However, what I think is fun is to be able to say, well, what if I want, for example, a Bogner XTC cab? And what if I wanted it to have a pentode push-pull EL KT or KT88, and I wanted it to be a little less contour and a little less depth. And I can then just sort of change up so many parameters. Changing the cab. Let's go to a Hughes & Kettner 4x12. And you can hear the sound of those tubes really changing the response of the amp. So the power amp tunes it, I mean. So we've got the KT88 sound big and full, and as opposed to, say, the much more compressed EL84. A little bit more top end in the 34, and more top end again in the 6L6. But again, like to be able to say, all right, well, I want to make this sort of super amp that doesn't exist, and I want to do it with an analog front end, and moreover, I want to do it without having to, even though I can use an app, I want to do it without having to use an app or having to use a computer program to do this job for me. And that is really, really amazing as a studio tool. Like I can see myself taking just those two paired up just like that, and I would take that to a session, especially, you know, in a lot of sessions where you might be going to record at, let's be honest, someone's home studio or a hobby type studio. You don't have the ability to have all of your amps in the room with you. Now this would give you so many options between these 3 different preamps, a boost on each one of them, 4 different types of power amp tube in either single-ended or push-pull mode, and a lot of different cabinets and post effects in there as well. For example, enhancers and EQs and reverb. That's a super powerful way to pair these 2 units and get, as I've said before, the best of both worlds, the analog front end and the digital control.
Really great pairing. This Two Notes ReVolt and the Two Notes Opus as a pair sounds awesome. Which leads us then into the third pairing here, or the sort of the third way that I would use this. And that is actually to run ReVolt through the Two Notes Genome software. Now the Genome software is an amazingly powerful tool, and not only is it an amp simulator as well, but it does have all of the cabs and effects and all of the same post effects that the Opus has, plus more.
So as I mentioned before, the ReVolt as a front end to the Genome software is an awesome sound and an incredible way to get the analog front end into a very powerful digital platform. So what I want to actually have a quick look at here is some of the features of the Genome software, but then we'll do a little comparison between the sounds of the ReVolt into the Genome and the sounds of what some of the amps are in the Genome. So as a standalone plugin, it's an incredibly powerful tool and it sounds really, really great. First of all, let's have a look over here at the layout of the Genome software. So we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 slots at the top there. And so I can put in all sorts of different things from delays and amps and noise gates, and I've got an enhancer and a chorus, and I'll show you in a sec. But crucially, I've got my cab sim software, so I can select all of these different cabs. So I've got a whole lot in here which enable me to get a whole lot of tones that really sound extremely high quality. So let's start off here. I've got this sort of Marshall type cab and it has got greenbacks in it, I believe, or at least it's the slash signature one, so it gives you a little information about each of the cabs here. But I've got, Engels, and I've got different Marshalls. I've got a Hughes and Kettner one, that's an unusual one to see, but that's pretty cool, I reckon. More Marshalls, more kind of modern Betancourt sort of Randall one there. I got a Bogner Ecstasy sort of cab, lots of different cab types in here, but I'm just going to go back to this Marshall here. And I have also got a Noisegate on at the moment, which I'll show you its importance in just a sec. But the first amp we're going to hear here is this Gemini, which is something obviously like a Fender-style amp, and you can see that from the UI there, and it obviously looks very good. But let's have a quick listen to this for a start. Let's turn the chorus off and let's turn the cab off. EQ off. This is nothing. This is just straight in, no cab sim, no amp. Fine. Let's put our cab on and let's turn our Fender-style amp on. Which sounds perfectly good and an entirely usable tone. This Albion over here is kind of my Marshall-y sort of sound, so and then I have set up here as well a sort of a Soldano type tone. Which again, sounds awesome, don't get me wrong. Let's hear the Noisegate in action here though. So it's currently on, I'll turn it off. So that's obviously a really important feature of recording, is having that Noisegate built in. All right, so I want to show you some of the other things that happen in the Genome software here. So I'm going to just go back to my Marshall-y sort of sound. I have got a bunch of effects and cabs that I can use, but let's have a listen to some of the extra things in here. So let's go to this Hero 60. Now this is something like a Juno-style chorus. And I can move it as well. So I could move that to be post-cab if I wanted to. Which makes a little bit of a difference, but the range of effects in here that I've got is massive. So I've got, phasers and flangers, and I've also got, filters and then pitch. So for example, if I put on here and I go to this organ donor, we can see that looks very much like the new POG, the Electromonics POG. So this is, let's take the fifth out and let's slide the highest and lowest octaves down. Which is awesome. I've also got a bunch of presets in here. So if I just go to this dramatic organ, I'll get a clean sound for this, hey? Let's do one more. Let's get this gentle crystals. Let's get back to my Marshall here. I can also have in here, I can have modulation. So let's put on a flanger here. So this is a studio flanger. Which sounds awesome. Then I've got a couple of extra effects in here. So I've got this enhancer. I'm just going to move this over here. This enhancer is sort of something like a, you know, a little bit of studio magic that you can add to your tone. So if I have, there's my guitar sound currently. I can just add some body and thickness and brilliance, it says, and again, it's one of those effects that you sort of turn on and go, oh, it doesn't do much, and then you turn it off and you realize, oh wow, that was actually doing a lot. So that coupled with, say, an EQ, you know, if I turn this EQ on, let's go warm sparkle. Which all sounds, you know, really, really high quality, and the sort of thing that you can get really, really amazingly good, quick sounds into your recordings. Now, then we add in a couple of other fun features in here. I've got this twin tracker. Let's have a listen to this. So that's just my guitar. It's just me playing guitar. Now then, I put the twin tracker on, and it kind of does this faux double tracking effect, but it does it really well. So I can also make it tighter or looser by making them closer, you know, appearing closer together. So and again, you know, like you only have to have that on relatively subtly for it to make quite a difference. So here it is off. And then on. Which I think sounds awesome, especially if you're doing something like making a demo, or, you know, you need a pretty high quality guitar track pretty quickly. That's a killer way to get a double tracked guitar sound without actually having to do it twice. You could also add this on. Let's say you got the perfect take and you think, I'll never do that again. I would love to double that solo. That's a great way to get that effect there. Let's add in a delay here. I've got this studio delay, and I've currently got it set to a quarter note and a dotted eighth note for that sort of Andy Timmons left-right bounce thing. So if I turn this on, very high quality. I've also got lots of different delays in here too. I've got, you know, Astro Repeater is obviously like a space echo, and we have got something that's sort of like the MXR Carbon Copy, and then the Carbon Copy Pro, which I think is kind of a cool thing to have. And so that gives you a little bit more width and a bit more control over your modulation, but really nice sounding analog delay. And if I go to milliseconds here, you know, it can get, again, almost in that kind of doubling territory there as well, which is, you know, it's again, it's just like the power that you have in this plugin is awesome. I'm going to go back to studio delay here. I want to unlink that. I want to make that a quarter note and that a dotted eighth note. Let's do our comparison between our ReVolt and the 3 amp sounds that are in there. For the sake of this, I'm going to leave the enhancer and the delay on. Just a subtle amount of delay, but I'm going to leave them on just for the sake of it because I think they sound really good. First of all, let's go over to our Gemini, our kind of Fender-style amp here. So I've got my Fender-style amp keeping everything pretty close to being in the middle, and I'm going to do the same thing over here on the ReVolt. So everything is going to be pretty much straight up the middle EQ-wise. So here we go with the digital Fender sound. Sounds like this. Now, if I go over here and I turn on this clean sound, so straight away, there's a lot more bass in there. I'm going to turn the gain down and the volume up a bit. Probably a closer sound comparison, but there is just so much more low end and warmth in that ReVolt sound to my ears. Let's compare them a bit. Again, if I turn the gain down and the volume up, I've also got my boost. Oh, now, in terms of pleasing guitar sounds, that's a really, really lovely, clean tone. And that boost, just having that boost at my fingertips there on the ReVolt, I think makes it so handy. And to be able to just quickly change those EQ settings. Again, I know it's very easy to do that with a mouse here, but there's something about the tactile nature of putting my fingers onto these controls and actually using them, which is great. So I'm going to keep the gain up a little bit there. I'm going to turn this. Again, if I bypass that and turn this amp on. Again, nothing wrong at all with the tone of the Genome version of this Fender clean sound, but it feels more digital. It really genuinely does feel more digital. And that warmth of having this real tube in front of this software just makes for an incredibly pleasing guitar sound, and then the ease of the digital application of effects and cab changes. It's a killer combo. It's a really awesome combo. Let's compare let's say the crunch setting on the ReVolt here with our Albion or our kind of Marshall sound. So we'll turn our Fender off there, put our Marshall on here. Here is the Genome's Marshall with the humbucker here. I'm going to turn my delay feedback down a bit, I think. That's better. Let's hear the ReVolt now. So if I go over to the crunch here and I push the crunch, again, I've got all of the EQ pretty much at 12 o'clock. Again, there's a lot more low end straight away, so I might just back that bass off a bit. So let's now hear the ReVolt. So I've got the Crunch setting on the ReVolt here. Everything's kind of at 12 o'clock EQ-wise, lowish gain, and then I'm still on the humbucker kind of sound here. More low end in that too. I'm going to bring the low end out a bit. Once again, I have the access to that boost as well. It sounds better. Straight up, it just sounds better. The ReVolt plus the Genome backend sounds better. Let's hear the Snakebite 50, which is the sort of Soldano in the Genome. Now I like a little just feature there I've just noticed. When I turn the amp on in the software, you can see it actually turns the light on and the tubes come on. If we turn that on, little feature there I think worth having. All right, so here's the digital, if you like, the digital Soldano. Again, nothing wrong with that sound. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. But when I play it with a real tube, it just has that warmth. And I then once again have access to that boost, which is just such a great thing to have. So the Genome software is on its own an incredible tool, and it really has a lot of features in it that I think are totally worth the price of admission alone. When you then add in the ReVolt, which is the fully analog front end, the tube warmth, and you also get the boost and the sort of tactile nature of being able to control things at your fingertips, plus all of the power of the Genome, it's pretty much a no-brainer. The ReVolt does come with the Genome software. It's not the entire version of the software, but it is enough of the software that you are going to be able to get killer sounds straight up. It works as a standalone unit. It works as a plug-in inside your DAW, and it really is probably the easiest way to get the highest quality tone that you can. And if you're quickly recording, if you're needing to make sounds that are going to be able to be used in such a way that people are going to be inspired, I don't think there's any other way to do it than an analog front end and a digital back end.
As a live tool, the Opus has the vast majority of what the Genome software does inside the Opus. So as a live kind of setting, having the ReVolt and the Opus, and as you can see, they're not very big, they would fit on a pedal board. That is an incredible fly rig or a travel kind of rig or a direct to PA, or the sound guy says you have to turn down, so let's just run straight into something like this. But the ReVolt itself as a front end, I think, is just, even as a basic headphone amp, it sounds great. When you add in the cab sim, it's a great addition. When you add in the effects loop, Another great addition, you add in the XLR out and they've really thought of everything. That is on its own, that could be a perfect tool for any guitarist. Coupled with all of this stuff, there's a myriad options that you can explore. The other thing that is great is that when you buy a ReVolt, it comes with the Genome software, so the basic version of the Genome software, and it enables you to have access to that when you get this. So it's not like you have to make an extra purchase after you buy the ReVolt. But I think that really, whilst it's not a new product for Two Notes, it's an incredible tool, and if you are in the market for some kind of home recording situation or some kind of direct guitar situation, the ReVolt is definitely worth your attention, especially when you add it to the Genome software. So check it out. As always, thanks for watching Noisegate. See you next time.